The Gaza-Israel conflict is a part of the wider Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Palestinian militant actions escalated in the Gaza Strip following the overwhelming election to government of the Islamist political party Hamas in 2005 and 2006. The conflict escalated with the split of the Palestinian Authority into the Fatah government in the West Bank and the Hamas government in Gaza, and the following violent ousting of Fatah after Fatah lost the election to Hamas. Palestinian rocket attacks on Israel and the joint Egyptian-Israeli blockade of Gaza have exacerbated the conflict. The international community considers indiscriminate attacks on civilians and civilian structures that do not discriminate between civilians and military targets illegal under international law. As part of its 2005 disengagement plan, Israel retained exclusive control over Gaza's airspace and territorial waters, continued to patrol and monitor the external land perimeter of the Gaza Strip, with the exception of its southernmost border, and continued to monitor and blockade Gaza's coastline. Israel largely provides and controls Gaza's water supply, electricity and communications infrastructure. According to Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, Israel remains an occupying power under international law. The United Nations has stated that under resolutions of both the General Assembly and the Security Council, it regards Gaza to be part of the occupied Palestinian territories. Meanwhile, the Fatah government in the West Bank, internationally recognized as the sole representative of the State of Palestine, refers to the Gaza Strip as part of the Palestinian state and does not recognize the Hamas government, thus avoiding the conflict. Background: Israel-Gaza barrier. The Gaza Strip has been separated from Israel by the Israel-Gaza barrier since 1996, which has helped reduce infiltration into Israel. Since the beginning of the Second Intifada, Gazans are no longer permitted to enter Israel for work purposes. Special permits to enter Israel for medical purposes have also been greatly reduced, which has made travel for Palestinians a difficult task. Daniel Skueftan, in his 1999 book Disengagement, Israel and the Palestinian Entity reviews new and existing arguments underlying different separation stances, in order to make the case for separation from the Palestinians, beginning with those in the West Bank and Gaza. Skueftan favors the hard separation stances of politicians like Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Barak. Yitzhak Rabin was the first to propose the creation of a physical barrier between the Israeli and Palestinian populations in 1992, and by 1994, construction on the first barrier, the Israel-Gaza barrier, had begun. It is actually a wire fence equipped with sensors. Following an attack on Betlet near the city of Netanya, Rabin specified the objectives behind the undertaking, stating that this path must lead to a separation, though not according to the borders prior to 1967. We want to reach a separation between us and them. We do not want majority of the Jewish residents of the State of Israel, 98% of whom live within the borders of sovereign Israel, including a united Jerusalem, to be subject to terrorism. Second Intifada. The Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada, began in September 2000. Many Palestinians consider the Intifada to be a struggle of national liberation against Israeli occupation imposed on them following the 1967 war, whereas many Israelis consider it to be a terrorist campaign. Palestinian tactics have ranged from carrying out mass protests and general strikes, as in the First Intifada, to mounting suicide bombing attacks and firing Qassam rockets into southern Israeli residential areas. Israeli tactics range from conducting mass arrests and locking up Palestinians in administrative detention through setting up checkpoints and building the Israeli Gaza Strip barrier and West Bank barrier to carrying out assassinations targeting militants and leaders of Palestinian organizations. Since the Palestinian legislative election 2006, Israel has been negotiating with Mahmoud Abbas and the PLO, but has been simultaneously targeting and bombing Hamas activists and militants and arresting Hamas's elected legislative council politicians. The death toll, both military and civilian, over the entire period in question is estimated to be over 4,300 Palestinians and over 1,000 Israelis. To date, 64 foreign citizens have also been killed. Israel's unilateral disengagement. Israel implemented its disengagement plan in August-September 2005, withdrawing its civilian and military presence from the Gaza Strip, and retaining control over the Gaza airspace, maritime access and borders, even with Egypt, according to the 2005 agreement with Palestinian Authority. Qassam rockets were fired regularly prior to the Israeli disengagement, and the frequency of Qassam attacks increased after the disengagement from Gaza. Palestinian militants have targeted a number of military bases and civilian towns in southern Israel. Since 2001, Palestinian militants have launched thousands of rocket and mortar attacks on Israel from the Gaza Strip. 13 Israelis have been killed and hundreds injured as a result of Qassam rocket fire at Israeli targets. Additionally, Qassam rocket attacks have resulted in post-traumatic stress disorder in both children and adults, with 33% of children living in Derot suffering from PTSD. Ascendancy of Hamas. When the Islamic Party Hamas won the January 2006 Palestinian legislative election, gaining a majority of seats in the Palestinian Legislative Council, the conflict between Israel and Gaza intensified. Israel sealed its border with the Gaza Strip, largely preventing free flow of people and many imports and exports. Palestinians have been shooting Qassam rockets at Israeli settlements located near the Gaza borders, and have staged cross-border raids aimed at killing or capturing Israeli soldiers. In one such raid, on the 25th of June 2006, Palestinians captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, leading to massive retaliation by the Israeli army, which included airstrikes against Hamas targets. In June 2007, internal fighting broke out between Hamas and Fatah, and Hamas fully consolidated its power by staging an armed coup d'état and taking control of the Gaza Strip. Following the internecine fighting that occurred between 7 and 15 June 2007, also known as the Battle of Gaza 2007, in which 118 Palestinians were killed and over 550 were wounded, the entire Gaza Strip came under full control of the Hamas government. As a response to the Hamas takeover, Israel sharply restricted the flow of people and goods into and out of Gaza. About 70% of Gaza's workforce have become unemployed or without pay, and about 80% of its residents live in poverty. Since Hamas takeover, Palestinian armed groups in Gaza and Israel continued to clash. Palestinian armed groups have fired rockets into Israel, killing Israeli civilians, including children, and wounding others, as well as causing damage to infrastructure, and Israel have launched attacks and shelled Gaza with artillery, killing Palestinian combatants as well as civilians, including children, and causing devastating damage to infrastructure. According to Human Rights Watch, the Palestinian deliberate attacks against civilians violate international humanitarian law. Because Hamas exercises power inside Gaza, it is responsible for stopping unlawful attacks even when carried out by other groups.